Good evening, everyone. I am Joe Vidal, the principal at Thurston Middle School, and I am so thankful to those of you who are attending tonight's presentation to partner with us on this very important topic of digital citizenship. We know some of the families are unable to attend tonight, so please know we are recording this session and we'll be sharing the recording and slide deck with you, as well as an FAQ document that will provide some insight on frequently asked questions before and during the presentation. This evening, we will also be monitoring the Zoom chat box and answering any questions along the way. I was able to introduce myself, but also sitting on this panel with me tonight is Yvonne Redard, Coordinator of Family Engagement,
Hello.
Glenn Warren, the District Teacher Librarian at the secondary level,
Good evening.
Andy Crisp, our Multimedia Teacher and TMS Technology TOSA,
Hi, everybody.
Miranda Craig, our Student Support Specialist,
Hi, everyone.
and Andrew Fredericks, our School Counselor.
Hello.
At the heart of everything we do is our learner profile. It's a shared vision of the kind of learners and people we want our students to become. Our learner profile highlights the qualities of a constructive collaborator, empowered learner, creative problem solver, empathetic citizen, and effective communicator. These not only embody what we want our students to learn in the classroom, but also how they behave in the digital world. As our students navigate more of their lives online, from schoolwork to social interactions, the importance of digital citizenship has become critical. It's not only about being safe, it's about being thoughtful, ethical, and responsible members of our community. And here's a few examples of how our learner profile connects directly with digital citizenship. As constructive collaborators, we want our students to work with each other respectfully, especially in digital spaces. As empowered learners, we want our students to take ownership of their learning journey, including how they use technology, whether that's asking for clarifying questions or seeking credible information and reflecting on how their digital habits affect their personal growth. All of those attributes are very important. As creative problem solvers, we want our students to approach online challenges like misinformation, digital dilemmas, or tech issues with innovation and perseverance, and not just use technology to consume, but also to create and contribute. As empathetic citizens, we want our students to consider the feelings and perspectives of others, even from behind the screen. And as effective communicators, we want our students to know how we express ourselves online, um, and how much that matters, which includes striving to be clear, honest, and responsible with their own words and understand the lasting impact of their digital voice and footprint. And as always, your partnership is essential in helping our students develop these habits and mindsets, both in and out of school. So with that in mind, our outline tonight is to provide you with information on how we teach our students digital citizenship at Thurston Middle School, how we provide awareness around internet safety, and also share the potential legal ramifications and impact of mental health if students are not using technology ethically or not aware of the potential dangers of negligent technology usage. And by sharing this information with all of you, on the next slide, um, we hope that all of you have a stronger partnership with us in raising our kiddos to be empathetic and empowered digital citizens, as well as be aware of the potential dangers and report an issue or to get help when necessary. So on that note, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Crisp to discuss digital citizenship at Thurston Middle School.
Thank you, Mr. Vidal. Again, my name is Andy Crisp, and I am the multimedia teacher at Thurston. I also train teachers in technology and do a variety of other things. But Mr. Warren and I, Glenn, are going to tag team what we're doing in the classrooms at Thurston to address digital citizenship. So I want to start with the sixth graders. So the sixth graders at Thurston There I am. The sixth graders at Thurston are required to complete a digital citizenship course. So all sixth graders take this course, and they hopefully pass it and earn a certificate. And this is on a website called EverFi. So this is the platform that we use. Mr. Fredericks is going to open that up and show you the lessons that they go through. So the first lesson, if you could, yeah, there you go. The first lesson is called Connections and Community. And basically, this is an intro lesson for students to basically learn what it means to have a digital identity and one that is potentially permanent. And so having kids understand that the choices they make with the things that they do in the digital space have some permanence potentially. It also talks about having a positive presence online and just building a positive online community. The second lesson deals with safety and privacy. So students learn about what a digital footprint is, how do they maintain privacy, how they avoid things like identity theft, and stay secure online. The third lesson delves into screen time versus offline time. So students are thinking about what are the potential consequences for spending too much time in front of a screen, and how do they put in place a plan to find a healthy balance between online time and offline time. The fourth lesson deals with technology and data. So this lesson is all about having students run through various simulations, and they do things like create safe and smart passwords, how to identify digital threats such as phishing schemes, and identity theft, things like that. The fifth lesson is about rights and literacy. So it's really about content creation and having students understand what it means to create content responsibly and thinking about what they create and where they post it, whether it's social media or elsewhere, posting appropriate text, photos, videos, things like that. So what does it mean to be responsible in terms of content creation? And then the last lesson is about evaluating content. And this is just a little intro that Mr. Warren helps students out with on a much deeper level in seventh and eighth grade. But just an intro into evaluating online content, analyzing things for accuracy, understanding perspective and potential biases by people who create content. So again, this is called EverFi, and it's a subcourse on the EverFi platform called Ignition. And all students, sixth grade students, are required to take this and pass it and earn a little certificate. The next thing that I wanted to just briefly touch on is this school year, we implemented a new school-wide cell phone policy. So this really gets back to having a healthy balance between screen time and not being on a screen. And so we made a change this year where all classrooms have a box or a pouch at the front of the class where students immediately know to walk in, put their phones there, put their Apple Watches in there, so that they are not going to be tempted to be distracted during class. And what we found is that having this consistent policy where every teacher school-wide is implementing this, we've eliminated things like, well, Mr. Crisp allows me to do this, but Miss So-and-so does not. So the kids know that this is a school-wide expectation. They know what the rule is. And we want our students engaged in class. We want them interacting with us, with their peers, undistracted. So this has been really great this school year. And then, not only are we asking them to put their phones away during class time, but we've also asked them to keep their phones and devices in their backpacks when they're outside during break, lunch, and in passing periods, so that kids are talking to each other and communicating with each other face to face. There is an exception. If kids have an emergency, we have a dedicated cell phone zone where they can call you guys at home if they need something. But for the most part, if you walk around our campus at break or lunch, you will not see kids' heads buried in phones. You will see kids playing and interacting. So that's been a huge change this year, which has been awesome. And then the final thing that I wanted to touch on before handing it off to Mr. Warren is last year we implemented something new. We had some digital citizenship panels. And this was a really great thing that we did where students came in. We brought in the whole school, but we broke them down by grade level. And we had a fairly lengthy conversation with them about digital citizenship. And we broke it down into 5 categories. So the positive roles of technology, digital footprint, cyberbullying, time management, and legal and ethical behavior. And the way that we set this up after a little short intro is we read them a series of vignettes or small, short real-life scenarios. Like, for example, a student is rushing to get an assignment done and decides to use AI to finish it. Is that ethical? Is that okay? Or a student is a bystander to an acquaintance who is being bullied online, who's being bullied. So how would they handle that? And then after reading the vignette, we asked a series of adult panelists to give their thoughts on each of the vignettes. So we had Mr. Vidal there, so we could hear a principal's perspective. We had our SROs there to hear a legal perspective or a law enforcement perspective. We had our digital librarian there, Mr. Warren, to hear his perspective, our counselors, social workers, and our chief technology officer. And it was just really great to hear at each of the grade levels these panelists talk about it from the various viewpoints. And then we finished with anonymous student questions so that our panelists had a chance to address student questions and concerns that came up. And we allowed them to ask those anonymously so that they didn't have to worry about their name being attached to it. But it was really great because it was an opportunity for us to give our students voice, which is something that we really value at Thurston, is giving our students voice. And that's a good handoff to go to Mr. Warren, because Mr. Warren is probably one of our biggest champions on our campus about giving students a voice. So, Mr. Warren.
Well, thank you, Mr. Crisp. That's fantastic. My name is Glenn Warren. I am the district teacher librarian for secondary for the Laguna Beach Unified School District. My area of expertise is media and information literacy and advancing the love of learning and reading, those things called books, as you've probably heard. I'm not sure if you can relate to this next picture that's coming up, but I think many parents can. Just take a look. I'm not sure, but I think I've heard from quite a few parents there's concern about how much time the students are spending on their devices and maybe not necessarily creating the greatest conversations at home. And so that's an issue, the idea of balance with the technology and relationships. And when I show this picture to students, which I have, they relate to this pretty quickly. They understand it. But when I show them this next picture, it's almost universal that they start groaning. You can hear the groaning in the room. The students are going, yeah, I relate to that. Because what they're also seeing at home is, as they're hearing about they're spending too much screen time or having too much screen time, they're also observing a similar situation with the parents and other family members. So the true piece we want to get to is this is digital citizenship is an everybody thing. And it's great that we've got such good learning going on with our sixth graders. It's great that we have that EverFi piece happening, but we also need to include all of our students, our seventh and eighth graders. And so we've managed to give our sixth graders a little extra dose of digital citizenship on top of Mr. Crisp has done, and also to make sure that we're repeating and going deeper with the same themes with our seventh and eighth graders. So I'd like to kind of unpack for you what that looks like. What we have is pretty much 4 or 5 pillars that we pay attention to, and we keep repeating them as we go through the grade level. So, for example, being polite online, keeping that personal information. I know many adults are struggling with that, and so it's important to keep that in front of our students, responding to uncomfortable situations, not keeping, when something happens, not to keep it to yourself, but to say something. If somebody sees someone else going through something, to be that upstander and say something. And we just talked a little bit about screen time and the idea of how to balance that. And for each grade level, as we go through, it gets a little deeper, a little more complex. And then, of course, we really do need to be explicit about the legal and ethical considerations. Oftentimes, students aren't fully aware that what something they thought was just funny was actually not so funny. In fact, it may have been an unethical or perhaps even an illegal action. So it's really important for our students to have that front-loaded information, and we've done that. And the way we've done that is through Edpuzzle. And Edpuzzle is a kind of fun thing. Edpuzzle shows movies and asks questions of students as they go through it. And here's a little example of what a report we have on each student. It gives us how much did they understand about the information. We made sure that they knew if we see students doing poorly on that interaction, we might reach out to them directly and have a conversation with them. So it's a good accountability to know if they're getting those themes and getting that understanding. But here's an example of what it looks like. And who's going to be driving this? Is this Mr. Fredericks, are you doing that? I think you are. So let's play the game here. We're going to open up this first one, and you can see it starts with this movie that the students see about students that have gone through some negative experience and how they wished there was somebody who would have been an upstander for them, somebody who, would have said something. And so this kind of sets the foundation for the students, and it explains what bullying, actually cyberbullying, is all about. It kind of breaks down with pretty good detail, what does it mean, or what is cyberbullying? And so we have there's an expert on the subject talking about it, and then once it gets to this certain point, the video will stop and the questions will come up. And so we're gonna take this one on now. And you can see here it says, what are the aspects of cyberbullying? So you want to go ahead and give it a shot?
Yes. And we did a test run or two. I thought this would refresh. My answer was incorrect, but only because I didn't realize you could select all three.
And by the way, that Mr. Frederick, that's exactly what we hear from our students, which is actually fun because we're not really worried about the grade. We're not concerned terribly about the score. The fact that we hear that kind of voice coming from us, I didn't know you could do more than one. Actually, even though they were told, it's still wonderful because it lets me know that they're thinking, and that's really important. Let's try one more and see if we can go to the next one. And so it continues, and the students know right away if they got it right or wrong. Like, yeah, Mr. Fredericks, you realized that, whoops, didn't know I could do more than one. And so now this student is telling a story about how she, wasn't treated very well. And so now in her story, the question is, why was the wonderful person treated badly by other students? And there was two options: because she didn't dress like the others, or because she was just different. And I think you got this one right. Yeah,
I sure did.
You sure did. And so this is the kind of thing, and it goes through, all kinds of different aspects. It even has, we won't show it, but it even shows how the digital footprint you get out there could actually impact your ability to get a job or to be accepted into college, or even have your college admissions reversed. This also caused quite a bit of conversation amongst students, like, wow, I had no idea that could potentially impact me in the future. So this has been really a great little tool for us to use to make sure that all of our students had, a baseline of understanding in both 7th and 8th grade. And so moving forward back to the presentation, get to the next slide. There we go. Coming on back here. Yes. So here, this is a link to what over 95% of the students have already experienced. If you'd like to do this at home with your students, again, because, repeating things is not a bad thing. Saying it again is not such a bad thing. Being redundant is not such a bad thing. You can use this link and you can actually go through the lesson together as a family for your 6th, 7th, or 8th grader. This would not be for your kindergarten through 5th grade student. This is specifically for 6th graders and up. That would be perfectly appropriate. One last caveat on all of this to say that we also have implemented this spring our research skills, which speaks to giving our lesson through Edpuzzle, giving our students a baseline of understanding about research and being able to discern if I'm getting multiple perspectives on things. Am I paying attention to where this information is coming from? Am I aware of the credibility and the reliability of sources? That's a little different than digital citizenship, but it certainly is supportive of being a good digital citizen. And finally, honestly, no matter what we do, if we are acting in a loving way and we are letting love be the compass setting for what we do, we generally will go in the right direction. But if we don't let love guide us, then there's always the law, which we do have laws that will always step in when we aren't necessarily willing to do the loving thing. So that concludes my part of it. Back to you, the next person.
Thank you so much, Mr. Warren. My name is Andrew Fredericks. I'm one of the school counselors here at Thurston, and I'm going to be going over just different areas that of technology use and social media use that can impact youth development. I will be presenting with our amazing student support specialist, Miranda Craik, who will be taking over in just a bit. But for this section, I really wanted to start off with just a moment of reflection. So if you could just take about 30 seconds and write in the chat your answer to what advice do you wish someone had given you the first time you got a smartphone? So I'll give you guys about 30 seconds. If you just want to pop it in the chat, that would be awesome. Okay, so I see someone wrote down how addicting smartphones are, definitely. How you're constantly running out of phone storage, that's for sure me. Every 3 months, I feel like I'm deleting everything on my phone. How overwhelming they are, definitely. That is actually a great segue to the next slide. The trials and tribulations of living in a digital renaissance. I saw this cartoon and I just really loved it. I thought it was so relevant to this topic. How we're not really talking about the, pitfalls of technology or smartphones, and we're not just focusing on the positives. It's really a catch-22 and finding that balance of what works for you and your family. But this cartoon is so great because when I first got a smartphone, you're thinking of it as this amazing, like almost personal assistant that's going to help you and help your life, make your life so much easier. And in a lot of ways, it has, moving away from like Yahoo Maps and printing out directions everywhere to just being able to look it up on my phone. But then there's also like the downside where, I got a watch as a gift and it's connected to my phone and it beeps every like 3 seconds, it feels like. And that just feels overwhelming and so distracting. So there's definitely things to consider. And with that said, those things should be kind of reviewed and discussed with your child before they have a smartphone, because a smartphone is a lot like a car. It's a lot of responsibility, and there should be expectations and clear communication around having one, right? So one thing that you could do is use a cell phone contract. We have a list of resources at the end of this presentation that you can access, and a cell phone contract is in there. You can either use it as intended, where you go over the expectations around having a phone, and both you and your child would sign it. It's basically just an agreement on what will work best for you both. Or you could just use it as a guide, a talking piece, and kind of go through and highlight different areas that you think resonate and that are relevant. So it might be the piece on like, what time do you set the phone down at night? Or how much time do you spend on social media or just on the phone in general? So using it as a guide can be helpful, or just using it as it was intended as a contract is also something that could be helpful. Regardless, though, I think having that conversation is really, really important before you get the cell phone. So sitting down and kind of discussing like, what's the intention of having one? What are the benefits? What are some of the things to look out for? And then those expectations. But once you've had that conversation, not just stopping there, right? So continuing that conversation, keeping it fluid. And as time goes on, things will pop up where you might have to address something that happened on social media, or you might have to address the amount of time that's being spent on the phone and how that's impacting your child's life. So keeping that conversation fluid and those expectations clear is really important when it comes to having a cell phone. So, like most of us, social media is part of our lives, and at some point it will become a topic of conversation. These bullet points are kind of the main areas that we see pop up when it comes to students and their use of social media. I think the first one is probably the most important. So safety and privacy when having social media is so important. Um, First of all, I think it's just setting profiles to private so that your child is protecting their privacy and their information. That's really important and um, a good expectation to set before they start having a social media page. Along with that, it's important to set the expectation to not engage in conversations or friending people they don't know. So most social media platforms have a feature where they will suggest like the suggested friends feature, and it's based on an algorithm, and it's typically people they might know, but it's not always. So having that conversation around like if you don't know someone, just like in real life, like you're not adding them on social media because you don't know what their intentions are, and there's dangers around that. That is really important. Um, so keeping them safe, both with a private account and then not engaging in those interactions. But other things that we see come up that I think are more prevalent are the next two bullet points. So self-esteem and FOMO, or fear of missing out. So I think we've all kind of experienced this on some level when it comes to social media. You know, you're at home or maybe you're at work and you see that like a friend or family member is on vacation and they're, you know, on a beautiful beach, and you're kind of like, oh my goodness, like I wish I was there. I wish I wasn't at work. Um, Never me. I love my job, so I don't experience FOMO, but it definitely comes up, and I think that's a reality that needs to be discussed beforehand. So having a conversation just about, hey, you might see that your friends are out on the weekend doing something, and maybe a good group of them is together, um, not jumping to conclusions on why they're together without you is important, because that's a conversation I have a lot here at school. It's not always that someone is intentionally being left out. Um, the other day I was in classes giving a presentation, and someone brought up um, having they had a birthday party and they could only invite so many people. Um, it was limited, and they they were really mindful about not inviting their friends in front of the whole group because they didn't want other people to feel left out, which I thought was really great and kind. The teacher actually brought up, well, how do you navigate that when it comes to social media? Like, did you post on social media that you were, having the party, or later on, did you post? And so that kind of sparked a discussion around how do you navigate that on both sides, right? Whether you're having the party, you're invited to the party, or you're the friend that maybe didn't get an invite. Um, so the comparison game comes up a lot when it comes to social media, and navigating that can be hard both for, teens and us as adults. I also think it's interesting now with the use of AI that a lot of people can distort how they look and kind of create a false reality with using like filters that are so realistic. So that can really impact self-image and self-concept, especially as our teens are growing up. So discussing like, hey, everything you see on social media and what people are posting isn't always realistic. Like they may not look as like quote unquote perfect as what their post is. Because if you're scrolling constantly throughout the day and you're seeing what you perceive as perfection, that can have a huge impact on you if you're not kind of doing a reality check as well. The last two bullet points are also very, very common topics that come up here at school. So how is phone use and social media use impacting both time management and sleep hygiene? So we see a lot of time management being impacted when it comes to getting classwork or homework done. So when they get home, are they, maybe taking a break and then jumping on the phone and then having a hard time getting off of their phone to start their homework? Or are they, maybe at the end of the day, scrolling through social media and it's goes from being 8 p.m. until like 10 p.m. and they are losing sleep because of it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides, but these two areas are really common, and I think it's really hard. We heard from in the Q&A, the parents say that it's addicting, right? And that's so true for our teens as well. It's just hard to kind of peel yourself away from your phone sometimes. So having both that conversation and expectations is so important. And then lastly, we have this graphic, which we thought was great. It's the THINK acronym. So before posting something online or commenting something, just ask yourself, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? So perhaps you're at home and you see that your friends are, having a party and you're not there, and you feel really angry and upset, and you think you were left out on purpose, and you want to comment something unkind. Just maybe taking a moment and pausing and using this acronym to help prevent unnecessary like drama and conflict. That kind of brings us to our next slide, which is kind of the impacts or the differences between cyberbullying and traditional bullying. So we all know bullying as unkind behavior, which is intended to cause harm to someone else. And it's generally has some sort of power imbalance, whether it's a group of people against one, or maybe an older person against a younger person. But when we think about traditional bullying, it's usually viewed in the framework of school, right? So a student comes to school and they get bullied, and then they go home. And with that traditional view, it's limited, right? It's only happening when the student is at school, around that person or those people. It's generally easier to identify those people, the bullies, especially now in the day and age with, cameras on campus. And if it's easier to identify those people, then it's easier to address it and put an end to it. But with cyberbullying, it's still the same thing, right? It's unkind, it's intended to cause harm. There's some sort of power imbalance, but you add this layer of it being anonymous. So anyone can have an account and anyone can then comment on a post. It's with it being anonymous, it's so much harder to identify who those people are. And even then, once you do identify those people, it's hard to address it, right? It could be someone from across the world, or it could be someone that with a fake account. Both traditional and cyberbullying have serious long-term can have serious long-term damage to the individual. But it's just a lot harder to address cyberbullying. And to my point earlier about having a private account, that is one way you can limit the opportunity for someone to get cyberbullied. So if they have an account where it's private and they know who's following them, then you're limiting just random people or people that maybe they know in real life but aren't friends with from being able to comment unkind things on their post. I think that is a really great way to prevent this, and it's important to have that conversation with your child or your children, because if you go on any social media platform and you go to a popular post and you open the comments, you scroll through and you can see plenty of unkind or unnecessary commentary that's happening. And the best way to prevent that is with a private account. Okay, I am going to turn it over to our student support specialist, Mrs. Craig, who is going to talk about teen mental health.
Thank you, Andrew. So yeah, just building upon that topic of bullying and of the impact of social media on our students, I wanted to highlight some of the research that was done. So teen depression, anxiety, and self-harm began rising sharply around 2012. So right when smartphones and social media became widespread among teens. So that's just an interesting note to point out because although a lot was probably happening in 2012, other than the social media with in relation to teens being having more access to it, I think it's definitely worth noting and diving into a bit more, which is exactly what the book The Anxious Generation did. And it also found that depression rates have doubled in teens since 2012, up 145% for girls and 161% for boys. So the Surgeon General also took a deep dive into this topic and found that teens who use social media 3+ hours a day were twice as likely to experience poor mental health. So that would include doubling the risk of anxiety and depression. And when we think about anxiety and depression and we think about symptoms, being isolated or withdrawn, or we think about the social isolation piece for that length of time and the persistent piece, then it kind of does make sense why you would see how it could lead to a mental health disorder. Like 1 in 4 girls aged 12 to 17 had a major depressive episode in the past year. So that's more recent. And then teen suicide rates have increased by nearly 60% over the last decade. So, along with our phones being so widely used, just not only by us, but especially with our teens, you start to forget what healthy coping skills are. Or I think it can be easy to forget who our support network is that we can access and talk to face or on the phone. And I think a lot of those things are risk factors for, horrible outcomes to happen, like the teen suicide that we're seeing with that number. So if we flip over to the next slide, this is going to highlight some signs of problematic use. So, emotional changes would be one, and this would be outside of the normal realm of adolescent and teen development, where maybe teens are already just a bit more irritable or a bit more, wanting that independence. But this would be where you're seeing an increase. You're seeing that it's maybe severely impacting their life or their day to where they're not sleeping well. Another red flag would be academic or social decline. And if you can link that to noticing an overuse of the phone. Um, Maybe that looks like constantly checking the phone, negative self-image, or online comparisons. And then that again links to some of the data that was found too. Because if we consider boys and girls and the negative self-image piece, or the feeling hopeless, helpless, or even worthless as a result of comparison or constantly checking to see how many likes, and this is really specific to social media. You can see how over time and with a great length of time, like 3+ hours, where this could end up leading to something like a mental health disorder. And then, of course, we consider physical symptoms like eye strain, headaches, or neck pain to be another area to maybe dive into if you're starting to notice that. But we'll go to the next slide. There's hope. There's tips and tricks. There are things we can do to be really preventative when we're having this conversation, which I think this is why we're having this too. It's a great way to focus on that prevention piece. What can we do now if we're considering giving our child a phone or maybe having them have a little more access to the internet? What can we do now to put in place to ensure that hopefully it doesn't turn into a problem? And so some of the tips would be setting screen time boundaries. So what would that look like? It would be limiting screen time, creating a tech-free zone. Maybe you designate a space in your home, the dining room or the living room, where everyone turns in their phones, right? Even the parents, where we're all jumping in and saying, hey, this is a family norm we have. As parents, we're going to model this. And I know on here too, I'll jump ahead. It says establish routines is one. I think too is as far as establishing a routine and getting that going and then sticking with it, that can also create a lot of safety and trust in our relationships with our kids. because there is that predictability piece. There are those norms to where it's not a new idea every day or shifting the plan. It can be shifted, but it's great to kind of come out the gate with the boundaries and routines. And then, of course, with that, having those open discussions about social media, about screen time, using those great active listening skills to really just hear your teen out around what's going on. Check the temperature, what's going on at school. What are their friends saying about social media or phone use? Is that influencing them wanting to have access to it? Talking that out, having those face-to-face conversations are crucial. And then, of course, encouraging outside play, promoting physical activity. All of these things help to boost your overall mental health and well-being, right? When we're outside, it boosts our mood. When we are having conversations face to face, we're really truly practicing connection. When we have boundaries, even just personal boundaries, and we're following through with those, we're feeling competent and capable, just in our own skin and being able to set the tone. And so I think this all kind of makes sense as we talk it out as to why having some of these I guess routines and boundaries and following these tips and putting them in place can really help just to boost the overall well-being of our families. So if you go over to the next slide, I thought this would be a good one to highlight just that conversation around the adolescent brain, because I think we all recognize these conversations can be difficult to have. Our students, they're in a pretty critical age with their brain development. And so sometimes what might seem like a simple conversation to have might be a bit more complex because we're having it with a teenager or preteen. And so here are a couple of highlights I really like from the book Brainstorm by Dan Siegel. He's a psychiatrist and a professor and has done a lot of research around this topic. And so a couple of takeaways are that, you know, there are major changes in the area of decision making, emotional regulation, and social behavior in adolescence at this time. The teen brain, though, is highly adaptable. So there's a lot of learning and growth that can happen during this period. There's some social sensitivity. So teens are experiencing this heightened sensitivity to social feedback. That's why a lot of the times they care so much about what their peers think or what they're doing versus what we're saying, maybe. And then that impacts their emotions and relationships. So there's that sensitivity piece, a little bit more of that emotional intensity, which could lead to a stronger reaction. But with that strengths-based approach, though, too, it can also lead to having a stronger passion for something or excitement for growth and transformation. So it's not all spoken in from like a lens of, oh no, proceed with caution. There could be emotional intensity. It can be used and moldable and a really great thing and a great like skill that your child brings to the table when they're having conversations with you around this topic. And so I guess with that being said, the parent support is crucial. That open communication and guidance, although we recognize our teens need a lot of independence right now, they also need a lot of guidance because there are a lot of developmental changes going on. There's a lot going on in the brain right now. So the independence piece is great, but then also almost stepping in as like as a coach, as an emotion coach, as someone that can guide them along the way while also respecting that desire for independence could be something great to bring to the table when you're opening up conversations around social media, around technology, because that connection piece and the focus on that is going to hopefully give you the most buy-in if you are going to go over a cell phone contract, for example, because there will be that trust there and that mutual understanding that we're doing this together. And I think that alone can help with navigating those conversations. So if you go to the last slide, you'll see that there's a list of resources and including what Andrew was talking about with the social media contract and technology contracts. So again, you can use what's in those if you want to explore those later on to guide your conversation with your teen, to have those talking points to go off of, because it can be a bit intimidating, or emotions can be running high around this topic. So it's good to kind of go into it equipped where everyone's feeling calm, there's a bit more of a plan, and then also note that it'll be an ongoing discussion. And maybe it's something you're checking in about every week, and maybe you're revising as needed. And then there's also some really great resources like Bark Technologies. They have a phone with a preloaded monitoring app already on there. If we're talking about the safety piece and wanting to give a little freedom, but while also being looped in and keeping our children safe, there's Google Families. That's been a great resource. I've used that one. I found it to be really helpful. You can set time limits. You can have the computers turn off at a certain time and on. You can have preloaded websites on there, or allow your student to ask you if they could go on a site that sends you a notification. You can approve it. So there's another tool to explore. And then Common Sense Media is great because it's parents rating TV shows, movies, video games. So you can kind of check the temperature as to what would be age appropriate for the content that they're trying to access, and if it's in line with your values and how you feel around them accessing it, which each family is so unique. And so I think just honoring that and recognizing that and weaving in some of these tips and tricks, hopefully, can be a great resource to you as you're navigating this conversation together. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll pass it over to Yvonne.
And with that, we've come to the end of our webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We truly appreciate your engagement and thoughtful participation. We've shared a lot of information from a lot of valuable staff members here at Thurston Middle School, and we understand you may have further questions or insights. To help us improve and tailor future parent education opportunities, we've created a free feedback survey that you see on the screen. Simply scan the QR code or click the link in the communication you received via email or Parent Square. It should only take a few minutes to complete. Thank you again for being a part of our community. We hope you found this webinar informative and useful. We look forward to your valuable feedback and looking forward to seeing you at future events. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.